The woman in the navy gown crossed 2 feet of polished parquet, closed her fingers around Naya Beale's forearm, and pulled. "The kitchen entrance is around the side." She said it without lowering her voice, the way a person speaks when she has never once been told to. "Catering doesn't come through the members' lounge. I don't know who let you wander in here playing dress-up." Her eyes dropped to the row of ribbons on Naya's chest. The little rectangles of color, the bronze star with the maple leaf at its center. "And take those off before someone sees you. Those aren't yours to wear." The room had gone the particular kind of quiet that isn't quiet at all. 300 people in tuxedos and gowns under the chandeliers of the Rideau Garrison Club, and at least 40 of them turned. A young woman near the coat check lifted her phone. A man in a regimental blazer set down his glass so slowly it didn't make a sound. Somebody near the back laughed. One short bark, then nothing, because nobody was sure yet whether this was the kind of thing you laughed at. Naya did not pull her arm back. People would talk about that later, the ones who noticed. She had been trained, over 9 years and 2 tours, to read a grip in half a second and break it in less. Her body knew exactly how to remove this woman's hand from her arm. Her body wanted to, and she stood there and let it stay, because a soldier learns that the hardest thing she will ever do is decide which fights are hers. Then Colonel Ward Tennant came across the room with his jaw set, and the whole evening tipped on its hinge. "Eleanor," his voice was low and flat and carried anyway, "take your hand off her." The woman in navy did not let go. This person walked straight into the members' lounge in a costume. "That's Captain Beale." He stopped a foot away from both of them. "She's the reason there's a dinner tonight. The medal you just told her to take off. She's the one we're here to pin it on." And there it is. That's the moment. But if you stop the tape right here, you've missed the whole thing, because what happens to Eleanor Whitcomb over the next 9 weeks, to her family, to her husband, to this 136-year-old club sitting on land it pays the country $10 a year for. Not one person under those chandeliers sees it coming. I'm Drew. I dig up the things people pave over and plant a hedge on top of. Stay with me, because before you understand how this ends, you need to know who that woman in the borrowed-looking medals actually was, and what she'd already survived long before she ever set foot in that lounge. Naya Beale was 31 years old. She grew up in North Preston, on the high ground east of Dartmouth, in a green bungalow with a wood stove, and a grandmother who could make a Sunday dinner out of almost nothing and make you feel like you'd been handed the world. Her mother worked nights cleaning offices on Hollis Street downtown and came home smelling of industrial lemon and cold coffee. Her father was a name on a birth certificate and a face in 2 photographs. Her grandmother's name was Hazel, and Hazel had been born in Africville, in the north end of Halifax, before the city decided a black community on the shore of the Bedford Basin was a slum and sent in the bulldozers and the dump trucks, and, in one famous case, moved a family's belongings in a garbage truck, as if the things people loved were already trash. Hazel was a girl when they took the church in the middle of the night, so there'd be nothing left for people to gather around. She did not talk about it much, but she kept on a shelf above the stove a single chipped teacup that had been her mother's, and she would not let anyone use it, and Naya understood, without being told that the cup was not a cup. It was the address of a place that no longer appeared on any map. Naya ate from the school breakfast program 4 mornings out of 5. There was a laminated card you handed to the volunteer, and Naya learned to palm it, to slide it across the counter face down and cover it with her hand, because there were kids at the next table who would clock that card and file it away and bring it out again at recess. She was good at being invisible. She got very good at it, the way you get good at anything you practice every single day. When she was 11, her school sent her to a Remembrance Day ceremony downtown for top students. It was held at a club a lot like the one she'd end up standing in 20 years later. Old stone, brass plaques, a doorman. She wore her best clothes, a navy dress her grandmother had pressed twice. She stood near the entrance waiting for her teacher, and a man in a good coat walked up, looked at her, and handed her a green garbage bag. "Start with the lounge when they're done," he said, and moved on, already forgetting her. She held that bag for a full minute before a teacher found her, and the man's face changed, and nobody apologized. She put the bag down. She did not tell her grandmother, but her hands remembered the weight of it for a long time. The cool, slick plastic of it, the way the whole room had looked right past the girl and seen only the help. "I'm telling you this because you'll need it later. Hold on to it." She joined the reserves at 17 to pay for school and discovered she was built for it. The order of it, the way effort actually counted for something measurable, the way nobody on a ruck march cares where your breakfast came from. She went regular force. She was strong, then she was fast, then she was the kind of soldier other soldiers quietly arrange to be near when things go bad. At 26, she passed selection for a unit the Army does not put on recruiting posters, and at 28, on a night near Kandahar that she will describe to exactly no one, she did something that left 2 of her teammates alive who should not have been. The country gave her the Star of Military Valour for it. It is the second highest thing this nation can pin on a person. Fewer than 24 living Canadians wear it. She has a daughter. Sadie is 7. Sadie loves narwhals and hates the crusts on toast and calls her mother Mum, with the second syllable, dragged out like it's a small joke between the two of them. Sadie has never, not once in her life, been told she didn't belong somewhere. Hold on to that one, too. The invitation came on heavy cream cardstock in October, embossed, the kind of thing you can feel the cost of with your fingertips. The Regimental Association was holding its annual Valour dinner at the Rideau Garrison Club, and this year they were honoring Captain N. Beale. The club sat at the end of a long lane off a parkway in Ottawa, on land the National Capital Commission leased to it for a peppercorn, $10 a year, a number set in 1952 and never revisited. There was a bronze plaque by the front door, founded 1888. In the service of tradition, Naya read that line in the car, and something in her went still, the way it does before a door opens onto a room you can't see into. She'd learned to trust that feeling. She brought Sadie's grandmother, her late grandmother's sister, to watch Sadie for the night, and she drove out alone. She arrived at 6:15 in her mess dress, the metals catching the chandelier light. For about 4 minutes it was simply a soldier at a party. There were oysters and a carving station and a string quartet and a fire in a marble hearth the size of a doorway. Colonel Tennant shook her hand and called her captain and meant it. A waiter offered her a glass of something and she took a club soda. She was reaching for a canapé off a passing tray, of all the small human things, when Eleanor Whitcomb's hand closed on her arm. Eleanor Whitcomb was 63. Silver hair lacquered into stillness, pearls, a posture like a closed door. She chaired the club's membership committee, and had for 11 years, and she chaired the social committee on top of it, and she called what she did keeping the rooms correct. What it meant was that she walked the floor at every function scanning faces, table by table, looking for the one that didn't fit. She had never been asked to define what fit. She had never needed to. She had been the one doing the defining for so long that the question had stopped occurring to anyone, including her. Her gaze had found Naya within 90 seconds of the soldier arriving. She did not check the printed program on every seat, the one with Captain Beale's name and photograph on the cover. She did not ask Colonel Tennant. She crossed the room and she pulled. A young guest named Megan Frost had her phone out before she fully understood why. The clip ran 41 seconds. It caught the hand on the arm. It caught the words, "Those aren't yours to wear," clean enough that you could read them off the audio with the sound low. It caught the colonel crossing the floor and the 4 words that turned the whole night inside out. It caught Eleanor's hand opening, and Eleanor's face arranging itself, and Eleanor saying, "Not sorry, never sorry." Well, somebody ought to have introduced her properly, as if the failure had been the captain's, for the crime of not being announced. Knock did not raise her voice. She thanked Colonel Tennant. She stayed for the dinner, because walking out would have made the night about Eleanor, and she had decided in the space of one breath that it would not be. She let them pin the star on her in front of 300 people, and she shook the colonel's hand, and she said 11 words into the microphone that the room would still be repeating in a month. My grandmother was carried out of her home in a truck. I came here on my own 2 feet, and I'm not leaving until you're done with me. Then she drove home and sat in the driveway for a while before she went inside. By the time she'd put Sadie to bed, the clip had 200,000 views. By Sunday night, it had 800,000. 2 Ottawa stations led their late broadcasts with it. A national network had it by Monday morning. The headline wrote itself over and over in slightly different fonts. Decorated soldier told to remove her medals at Ottawa Club Gala. I want you to notice what the comment sections did, because it surprised everyone, including me. They didn't fill up with rage. They filled up with recognition. One comment, 20,000 hearts. I'm a vet. I've had a man at a Legion ask me whose wife I was. Another, I was that kid handed the garbage bag. I'm 51 and I still feel it. People weren't watching a stranger's bad night. They were watching their own, played back with the names changed. The club's response came Monday at 3 in the afternoon. 90 words, drafted by a firm. The Rideau Garrison Club regrets any misunderstanding that may have arisen during a private function. The club welcomes the guests of its members and is reviewing its event protocols. No name, no mention of a medal, no mention of a woman with a star of military valour being told her star was stolen. It called the thing a misunderstanding, as if a hand on an arm were a matter of interpretation, as if there were 2 reasonable ways to read it. Eleanor's own statement followed an hour later, through the same firm. Mrs. Whitcomb was concerned about an unannounced individual at a private event and acted out of an abundance of caution. Any host would understand. An abundance of caution. That phrase traveled badly. By Wednesday, the Regimental Association's 2 corporate sponsors for the gala, a regional credit union and a defense logistics outfit with a plant in Bell's Corners, sent termination letters within 4 hours of each other. Same careful language in both. Brand alignment. Effective immediately. The Municipal Heritage Foundation, that had partnered with the club on a speakers series, quietly removed the club's logo from its website. 2 charities that ran their annual fundraisers in the club's ballroom started phoning other venues. None of them said why. They didn't have to. Reginald Whitcomb, Eleanor's husband, 65, who ran a small development consulting firm out of an office on Spark Street, got a different kind of letter that same week. A municipal contract his firm had been shortlisted for went on review to another bidder. The review had begun 2 months before the gala. It genuinely had nothing to do with Naya, who never made a single phone call about it. But timing has a gravity of its own, and in a city where everyone knows everyone, people noticed that a Whitcomb lost a revenue stream the same week a soldier got her arm grabbed. And still, and this is the part that matters, the club itself stood. The board said nothing. The membership rolls stayed sealed. 136 years of tradition turned out to be a wall that a few sponsor letters couldn't get through. To crack a wall like that, you have to go down to the footings. Somebody was already down there with a flashlight. Her name was Priya Khatri, and she had been looking at the Rideau Garrison Club for 5 months before Eleanor Whitcomb ever touched a captain's arm. Priya was 39. Before she was a reporter, she'd spent 6 years as a settlement worker, helping newcomer families navigate a country that smiles while it says no. She left for journalism because she got tired of helping people survive systems she couldn't change, and she wanted to try changing one. She'd been at the Ottawa Ledger since 2019 and had a reputation for investigations nobody wanted to read until they couldn't put them down. A source inside the club's office had told her, off the record, back in the spring, that some applications got handled differently. That was the whole tip. Differently. She filed an access to information request in May. Her legal footing was the lease. The club sat on National Capital Commission land and took a municipal heritage tax exemption, and that public money, she argued, opened certain records to the light. The club's lawyers fought it for 4 months on private association grounds. The Information Commissioner's office disagreed. The records landed on Priya's desk the Monday after the video went up, which is the kind of timing that makes a reporter believe in something. She built a spreadsheet at her kitchen table. Applicant, year, how they'd identified themselves, outcome, 15 years of applications. Of the 68 that came from Black, Indigenous, Asian, or otherwise racialized families, 63 were rejected, 93%. For white applicants over the same 15 years, the rejection rate was 8%. She ran the numbers a second way to be sure. The gap didn't move. She pulled the rejection letters. They were identical. Everyone. The same closing line, "We thank you for your interest and wish you well," and the same 4-word reason, character and suitability review, with no explanation, no appeal, no phone number. Form letters, only the names changed. And the names she found among the rejected would have filled a wall. A Superior Court justice, an RCMP superintendent with 26 years in, a pediatric cardiologist, a couple who'd both earned doctorates at McGill, a man who owned half a city block on Bank Street. The committee had found every one of them wanting in character. And every racialized rejection for the last 11 years had passed through one committee, chaired by one person. The tax filings were worse. The club's heritage exemption and a federal grant for veterans' community outreach were worth, between them, roughly $160,000 a year in money the public never collected. $1.5 million over the decade, give or take. In exchange, the club had promised programming, open remembrance events, a bursary for the children of veterans, free hall use for Cadet Corps. Priya checked. No bursary had ever been awarded. No Cadet Corps had ever used the hall. There was not a single compliance report on file with the city or the NCC. Not one in 9 years. The community benefit was a ghost. The public had been paying 136 years of exclusivity to call itself a charity. The board minutes came last, and the board minutes had a sentence in them. In a meeting from 2 years back, under the membership review, a director, recorded only by initials, LW, was minuted saying the club should protect the character the founders built. LW was Lyle Whitcomb, Eleanor's brother-in-law, chair of the board. The character the founders built in 1888. You don't need me to finish that thought. Then a man named Cody Tremblay called her. Cody was 34. He'd worked the front desk from 2019 until the previous spring, and he'd been watching the news with his stomach turning, and he gave Priya a sworn statement his own lawyer reviewed. In it, he said the office had a system. When an application came in from a family that wasn't the usual, a staffer was to flag the folder and route it to the membership committee for additional review. The flag wasn't in any database. It wasn't an email. It was a yellow sticky note pressed to the outside of the folder. That's how a club with a bronze plaque and a string quartet sorted human beings. A square of paper that said, without ever saying it, "This one is different." Priya published in 3 parts: the data, the phantom charity, Cody's affidavit, and the sticky note. The club answered each one with 2 sentences from a crisis firm. The club has always complied with the law. We reject any suggestion of discrimination. 2 sentences. 63 rejected families. A bursary that never existed. A yellow sticky note. If you've ever held the receipts on something while everyone told you it was all in your head, you know exactly the kind of patience this takes. Leave a word in the comments. We'll know what it means. The Whitcombs did not crumble. 4 days after Priya's last installment, a letter arrived at Naya's home and a second copy at the Ledger. It came from a Bay Street firm with an Ottawa floor, 3 pages, and it threatened a defamation suit against Naya, the paper, and Priya personally for $2.5 million. The incident at the Gala, it said, had been a private misunderstanding weaponized for personal publicity and commercial gain. It demanded full retraction within 14 days and the removal of the video from every platform on Earth, which is not a thing a letter can make happen. Naya read it at her kitchen table, folded it in 3, and put it in a drawer. Then the second front opened, the ugly one. Inside 2 days, a cluster of new social accounts appeared, all created within a week of each other, all with stock photo faces and no history. They posted the same thing, over and over, with the discipline of a thing being paid for. Stolen valor, that Naya hadn't earned the star, that the unit she served in didn't take women, that she'd bought the medals at a surplus store and built a whole grift around one staged night at a club. They were specific, and they were vicious, and they were aimed at the one thing a soldier cannot easily defend without breaking operational silence. The exact nature of what she did to earn that bronze star, which is sealed precisely because saying it aloud puts other people in danger. The accounts knew that. Whoever built them knew that. Her old chain of command put out a one-line statement confirming the award was real, and the citation classified, and most people believed it, and some people, the ones who wanted not to, did not. It reached Sadie's school. Of course it did. On a Thursday, 3 kids said things they'd clearly heard at home. Your mum's a liar. Your mum's a fake soldier. One of them said it at lunch. Sadie came home and didn't talk through dinner, just pushed her toast, crusts cut off, around the plate in slow circles. Naya asked her about her day. Sadie shrugged. Naya asked again gently, and Sadie finally looked up and asked the question that went through the kitchen like a wire. "Mum, did you do something bad at the soldiers' party?" Naya put down her fork. She took a breath that she did not let the girl hear. "No, baby," she said. "We're on the news because of what somebody else did. Not you, not me." Sadie nodded. She did not believe it the way you believe the sky is up. She believed it the way a kid believes a parent who is scared, and she did not finish her toast. A girl whose mother had been grabbed for reaching across a table now would not reach across her own. That was the night it nearly broke. Not the lawsuit. Naya understood the arithmetic of a lawsuit, the cost of a fight that runs for years. What nearly broke her was sitting in the hall, outside her daughter's room at 11 at night, with her back against the wall, listening to the furnace tick, and realizing she was about to teach a 7-year-old the same lesson the world had taught an 11-year-old holding a garbage bag, that there are rooms not worth walking into, that some doors cost more to push than they're worth, that the safest thing is to be invisible and stay that way. She'd be damned if she'd hand Sadie that. The teacup on the shelf, the truck. You don't get to do that to a 3rd generation of us. She picked up her phone and called Renee Boucher at 20 to midnight. Renee Boucher was 54. She ran a human rights practice out of a row house in Montreal, and had argued before the Federal Court of Appeal more times than she'd remind you of. And she did not take cases for the cameras. She took them when the math of an injustice offended her, and she was extremely good at math. She listened to Naya for half an hour and asked 9 questions, and then gave her the whole strategy in one line. "We don't go after the woman," Renee said. "We go after the lease." The hand on the arm was a tort. Ugly, real, worth something and small. One woman, one night, a private wrong with a private remedy. But the data, the phantom charity, the sticky note, the board minutes, the public land leased for $10 a year while 63 families were turned away in identical envelopes. That pointed at something a courtroom could actually move. The target wasn't Eleanor Whitcomb. The target was the $10 lease and the $1.5 million that was supposed to buy the public something and never had. Renee took it without a fee. A document started moving through Ottawa that week. An open letter to the city and the NCC asking for a full review of the club's lease and exemptions. Public land should not subsidize private exclusion. It closed. It gathered 240 signatures, 11 clergy from 6 congregations, 30 small business owners, a retired judge, 2 trustees from Sadie's school board, and the names that landed hardest, the parents of 3 children in Sadie's class. 6 members of the club resigned. Their letters were short. One came from Dr. Alistair Renfrew, 76, a retired surgeon who joined in 1991. "I believed in this place's values," he wrote. "It turns out I never understood what they were. The ledger ran it. Then the moment nobody had on their card." At a regular city council meeting, during open remarks, Councillor Yolanda Bridgewater, 55, 14 years in municipal politics, the only black member of council, took the floor to announce a formal review of the club's heritage tax exemption. And then she set down her notes. "I applied to the Rideau Garrison Club in 2017, she said. "I was rejected under a character and suitability review. I have served this city for 14 years. I have a law degree. I sit on this council, and a committee on public land found my character wanting." The chamber went silent for 3 full seconds. Priya, in the press gallery, was already cross-referencing the name against the spreadsheet on her laptop, and there it was, a file number, a year, a one-word outcome. A sitting councillor, rejected by a club that survived on the public's dime. The community was in, the council was in, and the wall still stood, because the one document that turned a pattern into a decision was sitting in a place only an insider could reach. The insider turned out to be the last person anyone would have guessed. Julian Whitcomb was 29, Eleanor's son, a junior member who'd grown up inside that club the way some kids grow up inside a church. He hadn't slept well since the gala. He kept replaying the look on the captain's face. Not anger, that was the thing, not anger, something worse. A kind of practiced stillness, like she'd rehearsed being treated this way her whole life. 3 days after the dinner, he'd overheard his Uncle Lyle on the phone in the study, and one sentence had lodged in him like a splinter. "We talked about this before the function. I put it in writing." He'd said nothing. He'd filed it away the way you handle a blade, carefully, because you know it's going to cut someone. 5 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, Julian opened an encrypted message to Priya Khatri and sent one attachment. It was an email from Lyle Whitcomb, board chair, to the club's membership coordinator, sent 9 days before the gala. Subject line, function protocol, confidential. 4 sentences. "Keep an eye out for non-heritage applicants this season. Be discreet at club functions. We can't afford another scene like the spring AGM. This stays between us." 26 words, written 9 days before Eleanor Whitcomb crossed a room to put her hand on a soldier's arm. Keep an eye out for non-heritage applicants. That isn't ambiguous. Be discreet at club functions. Discretion. The same instinct that walked Eleanor across a ballroom to find the one face that didn't match the others. "This stays between us." It did not. Priya verified the header, matched the sender against board correspondence, confirmed the timestamp. The paper's lawyers cleared it. The story ran the next morning under a headline that didn't need a verb to do its work. Club board chair instructed staff to screen out non-heritage applicants. By noon, every outlet in the province had it. By the evening news, it was national. Lyle answered through counsel that non-heritage meant applicants without an existing member sponsor, nothing to do with race, which might have flown, except Priya had already published the numbers, and 91% of unsponsored white applicants had been approved, while the rot for unsponsored racialized applicants was 5. René Boucher printed the email and slid it into a folder that already held 63 rejection letters, a phantom charity, a sworn statement about sticky notes, and 15 years of data drawing one unbroken line. She drove to the federal court and filed for an injunction. The hearing was 6 weeks after a captain reached for a canapé. The room smelled of old varnish. The gallery was full. People who'd signed the letter, 4 outlets, 2 sketch artists, a row of board members in dark suits staring at the middle distance. The Honorable Adele Fontaine presided, 12 years on the bench, known for reading every exhibit and asking the one question that cuts the rhetoric off at the knees. Renee's argument ran 14 minutes. The public land at $10 a year. The exemption for community programming that did not exist. 15 years of data. A whistleblower's sticky note. A board chair's email 9 days out. She laid each document on the clerk's table. The stack was not tall. It was heavy. The club's counsel rose and argued private association, protected membership, no public character. Justice Fontaine listened. She made 3 notes. Then she asked the membership committee's longtime chair to take the stand, because Eleanor Whitcomb had been subpoenaed. Eleanor walked up in cream, pearls in place, spine like a flagpole, and took the oath. Renee's questions were short. Describe your role. Eleanor described it in the language of order and standards. Describe the evening of the gala. Eleanor repeated her statement. An unannounced individual, an abundance of caution, a misunderstanding. Then Renee placed the email in front of her. Mrs. Whitcomb, please read this aloud for the court. Eleanor looked at the page. Her hands rested on the edges of the paper. For a moment, nothing in the room moved. Then her fingers began to shake. Not theatrically. Nothing performed about it. Just a small, steady tremor that traveled up from her hands into the paper and made it whisper against the wood of the witness box. She read, "Keep an eye out for non-heritage applicants." Her voice dropped. "Be discreet at club functions." She stopped. "The last sentence, please," Renee said. Eleanor looked at the page. The tremor deepened. "This stays between us." The room was very still. Justice Fontaine reviewed the file for 20 minutes and asked the club's counsel one question. Could he identify a single community program the club had delivered under its public obligations since the exemption was granted? Counsel paused. "Those programs are in development, Your Honor." The judge wrote her ruling. The injunction was granted. The lease and the exemption were frozen pending a full public review by the NCC and the city. And she read one line of reasoning aloud. When public benefit subsidizes a private institution, the public acquires the standing to ask what that benefit purchased, and for whom. Naya sat in the gallery. She did not smile. When the ruling came, she nodded once, a small, contained movement that carried more than any speech she could have given. This was not a victory party. It was a correction. 2 weeks later, the board voted, 5-2, to suspend the legacy veto that had let a committee turn anyone away with 4 words and no appeal. Eleanor Whitcomb resigned from both her committees. Lyle Whitcomb stepped down as chair. The NCC announced public hearings. The club's lawyers stopped returning calls. Naya did not sue Eleanor. People asked her why, and her answer was one paragraph. This was never about one woman and one night. It was about the thing that put her hand on my arm and told her it was hers to do. You don't fix that by ruining one person. You fix it by taking away the public's stamp of approval. The defamation suit evaporated quietly, the way these things do when the underlying story turns out to be true. They rescheduled the Valour dinner, not at the club. The regiment held it at a Legion Hall in the East End, the kind of place with vinyl chairs and a kitchen that runs on volunteers, and a wall of photographs of people who didn't come home. It was simpler, it was warmer. There were paper poppies on every table and an urn of coffee in the corner, and somebody's homemade squares on a tray near the door. Naya stood in her mess dress with the bronze star on her chest, and this time when she crossed the room, no one reached for her arm. Colonel Tennant read the citation, or as much of it as the country would let him say. The last post played from a single bugle near the flag, and the whole room stood, and for the length of those slow notes nobody breathed. Then they let Sadie pin the poppy to her mother's lapel. The girl had practiced on the drive over, frowning, getting the angle right. She reached up, small fingers careful, the way a kid is careful when she's been trusted with something that matters, and she fixed the poppy just below the star, and the room, which was full of people who knew exactly what it costs to teach a child she belongs. made a sound that wasn't quite applause and wasn't quite anything else. Afterward, there was food, and Sadie went to the table for a square, and she reached across it with her whole arm out. Easy, unafraid. The way a child reaches when no one in her short life has ever taught her not to. Nobody stopped her. A hand passed her a napkin. Another moved the tray closer. Every hand at that table opened. A medal is not a permission slip. A plaque on a door is not a deed to the truth. And no person, not a soldier, not a counselor, not a girl, in a pressed navy dress, holding a garbage bag she never asked for, should ever be made to learn that belonging is something a committee gets to grant or take away. The Rideau Garrison Club is not the only club in Ottawa. It is not the only door in this country with a hedge grown over the footings. And the question a 7-year-old asked her mother in a quiet kitchen, "Did I do something bad?" is being asked tonight, somewhere, by another kid who reached for something and got their hand grabbed for it. We're listening for it. If this one stayed with you, send it to someone who needs it, and tell us, in one word, about the time a room looked right through you. We read every single one.